Islamic Revolution over there for the weapons.
Now, remember, Brzezinski believes that Islamic fundamentalism is the number one bulwark against Soviet communism, so he foments that in Iran. That's where the whole thing begins, really. And then he sends in these teams into Afghanistan, as you said, to get the Soviets in there and begin to bring them down. Brzezinski fundamentally believes that he can use the Khomeini regime against the Soviets. This is the problem you have when you have a policy of what might be called appeasement, but really of turning these other countries into kamikaze puppets, suicidal pawns, expendable assets against your bigger enemy. That's the
wind-up toys
of the Brzezinski method, right? You point them at the Russians and let them go. This cannot be avowed in public. Now, Brzezinski wanted to arm Khomeini, but he couldn't do it in public, and he needed a cover story. So he encouraged, in my view, the taking of the hostages as a piece of political theater that would allow him to continue U.S. military deliveries to Iran, and that what is called Iran-Contra started under Carter. And the U.S. military deliveries to Iran never stopped. There's a guy called Stanley Pottinger who's involved, and the Brzezinski National Security Council, where they had Iranian representatives. The so-called Captain Seytude was operating
under
the
U.S. So the power
Navy
never changes. They just remove a figurehead.
Yes, but again, it's part of this. The question is that you're trying to subvert those 5 critical republics in Central Asia: Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzia, and Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. Right, the 5 big Soviet Central Asian republics. That's your target. Now, Brzezinski, therefore, has a public policy, and then he has the real policy. If you think about the accusation of appeasement against Obama, it's accurate as long as you know what appeasement is. You can imagine Obama acting as a puppet for Brzezinski, talking to the Iranians. He would say, "Your real enemy is the Russians, not us. You've got to oppose the Russians in the Caspian Sea. You need a navy in the Caspian Sea. We'll give you a navy in the Caspian Sea so you can stop those Russians from taking your oil. You want nuclear weapons? We'll give them to you. We have special nukes. They only go to Moscow. You want some of those? We'll give you some right away." There is no objection by Brzezinski to Iran as a nuclear power, but this cannot be said in public.
How did Pakistan's armament and by the U.S. and England, how does that play into this larger chessboard?
I don't know if that's quite so connected. I mean, I think the U.S. obviously what you say is true. That's how A.Q. Khan was working for the U.S. all along. But again, the Iranian one is the really big one, because Pakistan has to be destroyed because the geopolitical instinct is pro-Chinese. Iran can be used as a puppet because the geopolitical instinct, as I've argued, is anti-Russian. So Brzezinski would say to them, "Look, didn't I arm you under Iran-Contra? Didn't I give you everything you needed? Yes. Well, then let me do it again for you now. I can deliver everything you need under the table, but let's get you going against those nasty Russians." Ahmadinejad will be out by next year. There's a new power constellation. This is what Obama would talk about. See, the neocons say, bomb Iran. Brzezinski, with Obama, says, no, talk to Iran, but destroy Pakistan. Remember, Obama
that's the same more subtle system that we see growing out of Carter and then being implemented by the Reagan, really the Bush White House, the Bush 41, 42 White House.
Yes, right.
Because what we're dealing with is with Iraq. I mean, I want to get your analysis on this. Same thing. They arm Iraq, tens of billions of dollars, have them attack Iran, then they tear each other up, and then you have the whole region descend down into another level.
Yeah, I have a whole chapter on the Carter administration, about a 40-page summary. People can't remember what a horror, how horrendous it was under the Carter-Brzezinski Volcker regime. It was one of the qualitative turning points in American history. Concerning what you've just mentioned, the Iraq-Iran war. Now, here's the problem. Brzezinski installs Khomeini. The Shah is driven out by Carter and Brzezinski. They stab him in the back. At that point, there's a military government, or Bakhtiar, a reasonable kind of
the Shah dies of a 24-hour cancer.
Government, and then they essentially then the Khomeini comes in, and when Khomeini shuts down all the development projects because they're not Islamic in his view, the country begins to fall apart. Now, they realize that Khomeini is going to be out within 6 months. The only way to stabilize Khomeini is to go to Saddam Hussein and say, if you attack, you'll have an easy victory. So you play Saddam Hussein against Iran. This leads to a war that goes on for the best part of a decade.
Knowing that will create nationalism and will actually strengthen the Islamic Revolution.
It will keep Khomeini in power. Now, all of this on Brzezinski's watch. So you've got the Soviet-Afghan war unleashed by Brzezinski.
But that's really what the neocons have been doing. Saber rattling has made Iran more hardline and made the government more popular at a point where they were about to topple.
Well, I would say there was a serious last-ditch attempt by Cheney to bomb Iran, most likely with nuclear weapons, last August, September. That was the rogue B-52. He tried as hard as he could, and he came within a hair's breadth.
But we just learned that they're trying to paint up the PT boats and have a conflict over there.
I don't see an attack on Iran. I would rule it out. The U.S. and the British do not want it, and the Israelis seem to have bought into the new strategy. In other words, their prominence in the Georgian picture indicates to me that the Israelis have seen that there will be no attack on Iran. There is, however, an attack on Pakistan going on right now. We've got the other side of it. The Turkmenistan Islamic Party is a puppet group of patsies in Chinese Turkestan, Xinjiang province, right, the northwest of China.
Who have now suddenly started rattling sabers and delivering their videos to the CIA front intel center.
All right, and they're run probably through the Pakistani ISI or maybe directly. Right, Chosudovsky has an interesting article about this. But the idea is that terrorism in China is also being stoked with Tibetans, with these Turkmen, or basically they're all Turks. They're all Muslim Turks between the Caspian Sea and Mongolia, Tibet. It's a Turkish area largely. Tajikistan, I guess, is the exception. So there are a whole bunch of Muslim Turks. And they can be used now, along with the Tibetans and along with the democracy freaks, the Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch crew, to try to destabilize the government of China. But now, let's also think, what's the new face of false flag terrorism? Let me suggest, I was in Amsterdam, Holland, a couple of weeks ago, the Docs on the Docks series, and I showed a bunch of pictures. Let's see what the new face of terrorism is. Cho at Virginia Tech. You look at him, well, he's Korean, but he might be Chinese. So he's a crazy Oriental Korean. He's not a Manchurian candidate.
And now in the middle of the Olympics, you have a Chinese guy killing two people, and it's hyped like aliens have landed.
But Cho is one. Kazmierczak, Northern Illinois University. He's a left-wing student with social justice concerns. He doesn't like the way the criminal justice system goes.
The other Chinese guy that ran around a few years ago shooting the 14 dare hunters.
And then I would then include the Unabomber. This is not quite as recent, but the idea of ecological terrorism. If you're a polluter, if your carbon footprint is too big, maybe the new Unabomber or Earth First or somebody like this will come and visit you. Then we have the classic ones done by the British against Russia to signal the coming of the new policy, which is Litvinenko, a Russian from the KGB with nuclear terrorism. Don't think about the relations, just think about the sort of pictorial memes of the myth. Litvinenko is one. Politkovskaya. Now, she's a Russian journalist who's assassinated, and they immediately blame Putin. All indications are that this comes from the Berezovsky stable. Boris Berezovsky, Russian oligarch, now working for British intelligence. Let's see what else we can think of. Ilyas Akhmedov. This is, of course, the Chechen ambassador here. He's the ambassador of the main Chechen terrorist organization, the one with Basayev and Maskadov, run by the CIA, which I would say they're the people who blew up those buildings in Moscow in 1999. They're the ones who did the theater, the school in Beslan, and also the hospital in southern Russia in 1995. The Chechens have now claimed probably 1,000 to 1,500 dead. So the Russians, if you add up the butcher's bill, the Russians have suffered from international terrorism at least as much as the U.S. in 9/11.